So, welcome to the DBMS class. In this class, we will be talking about the entities, the entity relationships, etc. So, in a view ahead, we will be talking about entities followed by entity relationships, and this entities and entity relationship we mentioned they will be taken up with this ER model. So in this ER model, we meant to say there are two options. First option we call it as entity, and it is meant with SSN, name, LOD. All these items we are going to call them as attributes. All these items we are going to call them as attributes. And these attributes, if there is an underline here, we are going to call it as a key item. We are going to call it as a key item. And now it is going to be a collection of different attributes. Hence, we are going to call this item as an entity set. We called it as an entity set. Now, there is one entity set, and there is another entity set. Now, we need to establish a relationship between set 1 and set 2. So, how can I make an establishment of relationship between set 1 and set 2? That is where we call it as relation. That relation, it is associated between one entity set with another entity set. So, we talked about this in our earlier class. Now, when we are going to mug up with these items, there is a word called as a relationship. So, relationship is going to be established which makes an association between one item, that is entity set, to another item called as an entity sets. So, we call 1 and 2 here as an entity set, and what's in, we are going to call it as a relationship. And this relationship, if it is going to have an attribute here, we call that one as a relationship set. So, now coming to an association. So, one entity set is associated with another entity set. One entity set is associated with another entity set. We are going to call that relation as an associative relation. Next comes a self-relation. Next comes a self-relation, or we are going to call it as unary operation. We are going to call it as a unary operation. In this unary operation, employee belongs to the same set, subordinate also belongs to the same set. So, assume there are two roles. Role number 1 we are going to call it as supervisor. Role number 2 we are going to call it as supervisor. And role number 1 and 2 they belong to the same data set called as employee, and they belongs to the same set and to report to each other. Now such thing we are going to call it as unary. I will give you an example. So assume there is a HOD CSC. So HOD CSC, he is an employee in this set. Assume there is a professor. Assume there is an assistant professor. Assume there is a professor and there is an assistant professor. Now, HOD we are going to call him as a supervisor. Professor, assistant professor, associate professor, we are going to call it as subordinates. We call them as subordinates. So, subordinates, they report to the supervisor. But where is the supervisor working? In the CSC department. Where is the professor working? In the CSC department. Where is the assistant professor working? In the CSC department. Therefore, employee, he is going to report to himself and he is a part of the group. Such an item, we call it as a self-relation. Such an item, we are going to call it as self-relation. That is where we call it as a report to relation, and that aspect we are going to call it as a unary operations. I will just give you a graph structure like this. So there are 4 nodes, node A, node B, node C and node D. So node B, it is reporting to itself. This is what we are going to call it as self-loop. The same self-loop concept is represented in this unary relation. Next one. We do have key constraints. We do have key constraints. So key constraints, when it is going to be implemented, it can be implemented with the mapping cardinality. It can be implemented with mapping cardinality. In mapping cardinality, it can be a one-to-one relation, one-to-many relation, many-to-one relation, and many-to-many relationship. Now, let us look into each key constraint in detail. Let us look into each key constraint in detail. Now, this is an example for association. This is an example for association. Now, it is having one relationship set, two entity sets. Okay, this is entity set 1, entity set 2, and this item we are going to call it as a relationship set. This is the first way. Now, SSN is going to be called as primary key. SSN is going to be called as primary key. The DID, the department ID, is called as an attribute, and it is called as reference key, or it is going to be called as foreign key. It is going to be called as foreign key. So, the compulsory condition to make an association between one entity and another entity was the other table what we are going to map must be a primary key, in that relation. Then only we can make a association item here. So, this is an example which it is going to show a works-in relationship. In this works-in relationship, it is going to take up the key constraint where it is going to implement since, and you can say this is an employee with an ID of 516 and he works in this department since the number of years we are going to mention. So 5 I can say it is a CSC department, 12 I can say it is an IT department, triple I can represent it as a 2, 4 I can represent it as a CSC. So we call these items 5, 12, 2, 4, we call it as department IDs. The 516 here, 516, 603, all these items we are going to call as employee members, and that employee members we are going to call it as SSN. Next comes managers relation. Next comes managers relation. Assume there are two employees, employee 1 and his number is 911. Assume there is another employee, his number is 912. Now, 912 from 2012 to 2016, he was the manager. From 2016 to 2021, 912 was a manager. What was the thing was both 912, 911, they are going to be the employees in this set. So if I ask you 911, whether he is an employee, yes. Whether he is a manager, yes. How long? I can say it is 4 years. Next I will ask you 912. He is an employee? Yes. He is a manager? Yes. How long? I can say it is some 5 years. So manager's relation, it is going to be associated with multiple entities. It can be 911, 912, etc. So this is how we are going to put a constraint with a key constraint and primary keys with 4 elements. Now, to see that a key constraint is supporting one-to-many relationship. To see that a key constraint is supporting one-to-many relationship, now I am going to represent an arrow mark. I am going to represent an arrow mark here. In the earlier, we didn't mention the arrow mark. Now for the first time, we are going to pose that we are going to have a one-to-many relationship. So that is, each department must have only one manager. Each department can have only one manager. Second one. Number of employees can exist in an entity set. Okay? Assume the CSC department is there. In this CSC department, we are having 40 staff members. Assume it like that. Then how many number of HODs are there? Only one. Tomorrow, there can be 35 employees. Another day, there can be 50 employees. But the employees supervisor or the HOD will be only one. That means every department will have only one manager. This relation we are going to call it as one-to-many relation, and it is going to be pointed out with a arrow mark. And it is going to be pointed out with a arrow mark. So that is what we discussed as a key constraint. Now, let us look into a new word called as participating constraint. Let us look into a new word called as participating constraint. Now, let me bring you the same context what I have given you earlier. Employee number 911, he is 212 to 216, 2016, 912, it is from 2016 to 21. So, he has been participating. So he has 911 and 912, that is 2012 to 2016, and another one was 2016 to 2021. In this case, we are going to have an employee, we are going to have a department, and the contribution, the participation of employee 1, that is 911, as manager is for 4 years. Participation of employee 912 as manager is for 2016 to 2021 as 5 years. So how long the 912 does or contributed as an HOD? I can say 5 years. How long 911 person contributed as an HOD? He has contributed as 4 years as a manager. So we call such entities as participating constraints. So participating constraints, he is an employee. There is no question about it. How long he works in this department, he is an employee. No question about it. But how long he is an HOD, how long he is a supervisor, from a period is that. So that much he has participated in a new role. We are going to put such item, we are going to call it as a participating constraint. So we talked about participating constraints. Let us look in today's class. We are extending from participating constraints to a new word called as weak entities. To a new word called as weak entities. So, as far as weak entity is concerned, if the employee entity set is active, then only dependent table or entity set is active. I will put an example, you will get a clear understanding. Okay? Now let me put like this. Assume I am an employee of this college. Assume I am employee of this college. Okay? So when as I am an employee of a college, they gave me a policy. They gave me a health insurance. They gave me a health insurance policy. Why they gave me as a health insurance? Because I am an employee of this college. Okay? So, health insurance will be given not to me, it can be given to my dependents also. Who are my dependents? My spouse and my children. Okay? If I am taking an insurance, health insurance, as long as I work in this department, I will get health insurance, my spouse will get a health insurance, my children will get a health insurance. Okay? Now, assume I left the college. So now, I will talk about first case. What was the first case? I am the employee of this college. I am given a health insurance policy. So, I will get the health insurance policy benefits. My spouse will get the health insurance policy benefits. My children will get the health insurance policy benefits because they are dependents on me, because they are not working in this college. My children is not working in this college, but they are dependent on me as I am an employee here. They are dependent on me. They get the benefits of health insurance. Now, assume that I left the college. This is case 1. Now let us assume that case 2. What is case 2? Assume I have resigned this college and I went out of this college. Now tell me the scenario. Will I get the health insurance benefits? No. Right? I will not get the health insurance benefits of this college because I am no more an employee of this college. If I leave the college, will my wife or will my children will get the benefits? No. Because I left the college automatically policy will be closed. Automatically policy will be closed. My spouse or my children will not get the benefits. So the dependents also will be lost. So such is what we are going to call them as a weak entities. In weak entities, as long as the core entity is active, the dependent entities are also going to be active. If the core entity exists, immediately the dependent entity is also going to be exists. So the policy benefits, if I am here, they will get the policy benefits. If I am not here, they will not get the policy benefits. We call such entities as a weak entity set. So we talked about the weak entity set. So in this weak entity set, the basic thing was policy number will be a primary key, no doubt about it. Policy number will be a primary key, no doubt about it. But when is this primary key active? As long as it is dependent on the employee. As long as it is dependent on the employee, this primary key is active. Therefore, we are going to put this policy diamond box in dark diamond shade. We are going to put it in a dark diamond shade. Similarly, arrow mark is also going to be dark. Similarly, the dependent entity set is also dark, because if the employee is in the organization, they are all going to get the benefits. If the employee leaves, that also will be terminated. So it is purely dependent on the first entity. We call a unique identifier by considering only the primary key of another entities. It is dependent on the primary key of the another entity. Therefore, we are going to put those items in the darkest elements. So, in today's class, we talked about relationship, entities, and then we talked about association. Thereby, we talked about unary operation. Then we talked about the weak entities. Now, we are going to extend a new word called as easy relation. We are going to extend a new word is easy relation. So, easy relation, it is going to take a object-oriented programming concept called as inheritance, which is implemented in C++, which is implemented in Java, right? We are going to have object-oriented programming languages. Their examples are C++ and Java. There we implemented classes, objects, data encapsulation, data binding, inheritance, polymorphism, overriding, overloading, etc. In that concept, the easy relationship, it is borrowing a concept called as inheritance. It is going to borrow the concept, or it is going to be implemented with a concept called as easy relationship with inheritance. So now it is interpreting SSN name attributes. They are going to be the attributes, and employee it is assumed as base class. It is assumed as a base class, and the contract employees, the hourly employees, they are going to be assumed as derived classes. The base class and derived classes. So I can say there is a base class here, and the base class can have 2 or more derived classes. It can be derived class 1, derived class 2, derived class n. We are going to call it as a derived classes. So what we are going to assume, it is going to be a multiple inheritance, right? It is going to implement with a multiple inheritance here. So one base class is there, multiple derived classes are going to be there. Now this is a new form of representing here is a relationship as it is going to be hierarchical, as it is going to be inherited. Now we are going to put the symbol in a triangle and we are going to put it with a word called as is a relationship. Fine. Now we should understand there are two words, one called as permanent employees, another we are going to call it as contract employees. Okay, let us take the scenario in our college. Assume the head of the department, professor, assistant professor, associate professors, these people, they are on rolls, they are in the department, therefore they are recruited for the department, therefore they are going to be called as a permanent employees. They are going to be permanent employees. Okay, assume there is a maintenance department. Assume there is a maintenance department and those people, they come to do electric work, they do come to do the wood work, they will come to do the sanitation work, etc. They will come for that day, they will work 2-3 hours, they will get amount for those 2-3 hours and they will leave. They are not going to be the permanent employees. Whenever there is a work, they are going to come here, they are working and they are going to leave. We are assuming them as contract employees. So now you got the difference. Next one. Similarly, contract employees need not be a person in the as a maintenance department. In the CSA department also, assume there are some guest faculty. Assume there are people who come from other colleges or other universities and they come here and act as a guest faculty. Now they are not permanent faculty. They will come at weekends, they will teach the classes, and how many hours they are going to teach, those many hours they are going to get the salary for that. So those people we are going to call them as a contract employees. So in a easy relationship, employees are divided into two types. Derived class 1, we are going to call them as permanent employees. Derived class 2, we are going to call them as contract employees. So derived class 1, we are going to call it as permanent employees. Derived class 2, 3, 4, n, they are going to be called as contract employees. Either the permanent employee, either the contract employee, they are employees here, right? So they belongs to the base class. They belongs to the employee class. They belong to the base class and they belong to the employee class. Everyone will also have the primary key. That is what we are going to call it as a SSN number. Got it? So employees are divided into one derived class, another derived class, and all of them they are going to set up with a relation, and that relation we are going to call it as is a relation. We are going to call it as a is a relation. So now we are going to have an aspect. Now we are going to have an aspect. We will be extending this with a is a relationship here. In the next class, we will be continuing the is a relationship, which is schedule of the 1 hour.